The sunlight hit my office window just right, casting streaks across the sleek glass desk. I ran my fingers over the silk of my blouse, the fabric soft but slightly stiff from a long morning of meetings. My phone buzzed insistently on the edge of the desk. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. It was a message from my brother, Liam. 3 words. Nothing else. We need to talk. My chest tightened. I hadn't heard from him in months. Not since the night he yelled it at me. The words I'd replayed in my mind 1,000 times. Get out of our lives. All you bring is trouble. I sat back in my chair, eyes on the city skyline, pretending I wasn't shaking inside. They thought I'd crumbled, that I'd never recover from that night. But they didn't know. They never knew. A faint smell of coffee from the break room reminded me of the mornings I'd spent alone, learning to stand on my own, one small victory at a time. I had built something they never imagined, quietly, fiercely on my own. And now Liam wanted to talk. I wondered if he even remembered what he said. Did he know the woman he shouted at was sitting here, calm, composed, and unbroken? I pressed my fingers to the keyboard. I didn't type. I just stared, waiting, calculating. I still remember that night like it was yesterday, even though I was barely 21. The kitchen light flickered, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Liam's face was red, his voice sharp, cutting through the quiet of our small family home. "You've done nothing but cause problems, Sophia," he shouted, pacing back and forth. "Get out of our lives. All you bring is trouble." I froze, the words sinking into me like cold knives. My hands trembled, and I felt the sting of tears I couldn't let fall. I wanted to argue, to explain, but I didn't have the words, or maybe I knew it wouldn't matter. His mind was made up. Mom sat at the table, silent. Dad's eyes were downcast, avoiding mine. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast and dish soap, ordinary scents that couldn't mask the extraordinary ache in my chest. I thought about leaving, and yet a part of me wanted to scream, to fight for the family I loved despite their cruelty. Then I remembered Grandma Ruth's words from last summer, tucked into my memory like a lifeline. "Sophia, no one can take your worth from you. If they push you away, take that push and let it carry you forward." I clutched the small charm bracelet she had given me for my 18th birthday, the tiny silver star warm in my palm. It was ridiculous, fragile, but it was mine. And somehow in that moment it felt like hope. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, as though agreeing with their verdict, and left the kitchen quietly. Every step toward the door was heavy but deliberate, a rhythm of resolve I didn't yet fully understand. That night, I made a choice, not to prove them wrong immediately, but to carve a life where their judgment could never define me again. I didn't know where I would go, or what I would do, only that I would not break. The world outside was waiting, vast and unknown, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. After that night, I moved out with nothing but a suitcase, my charm bracelet, and the stubborn conviction that I would not be defined by Liam's words. The first months were brutal. I worked at a tiny coffee shop downtown, barely scraping by, counting every penny, hiding the exhaustion behind a polite smile. The smell of espresso and baked bread became my constant companion, grounding me while I figured out who I wanted to be. One evening, after closing, I lingered in the dimly lit shop, sketching ideas in my notebook for a small interior design business I dreamed of starting. That's when I met Ms. Evelyn Parker, a seasoned designer in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that could see straight through pretense. She noticed my sketches and paused. "These are good," she said simply. "You've got an eye, Sophia. But talent isn't enough. You need patience, resilience, and courage." I nodded, unsure if she meant encouragement or challenge. She became my mentor, guiding me through business lessons, client negotiations, and the art of self-presentation. She taught me to walk into a room with confidence, even when every part of me still felt like I didn't belong. The nights were long. I would stay up until the city outside my window quieted, poring over design magazines, watching tutorials, perfecting my craft. Self-doubt knocked at every door of my mind, whispering that I wasn't enough, that Liam was right. But each morning, I returned to work with renewed determination, clutching my charm bracelet like a talisman. Slowly, victories arrived. My first client, a small boutique, gave me their entire space to redesign. The boutique owner's praise felt surreal, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Then another client and another. I rented a tiny studio apartment, which doubled as my office, and decorated it with thrifted furniture and framed sketches that whispered of the life I was building. I learned to keep my success hidden. No calls to Liam, no bragging posts online, no invitations home. I didn't need their approval. I only needed to see my own progress reflected in the designs I created, in the smiles of clients who trusted me. Each milestone, each small triumph, was a private celebration, a quiet defiance of the girl Liam had told to leave. By the time I secured my first major contract, a renovation for a boutique hotel downtown, I realized I had done more than survive. I had built something lasting, something I could claim as my own, without anyone's permission. The girl who once trembled at his words now held her own destiny in her hands. I hadn't seen Liam or my parents in over 3 years. When they called saying they wanted to catch up and see how I was doing, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity and a flicker of that old familial attachment made me agree to meet them at my studio. The moment they stepped inside, I watched their expressions shift, slow and deliberate, as if the world had tilted slightly under their feet. The loft was expansive, bathed in sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. On the walls, large canvases showcased my designs, bold textures, sleek lines, colors that seemed to sing. They froze. Liam's mouth opened, then closed. Mom's hands clutched her handbag tighter. Dad's eyebrows lifted, disbelief etched across his face. I didn't speak. Not yet. I let them take it all in. The polished wood floors I had personally refinished, the elegant lighting fixtures I had sourced from Europe, the vintage furniture I had restored. Even the small details, like the tiny silver star charm I wore around my neck, carefully displayed on my desk, hinted at the journey they had refused to witness. Finally, I cleared my throat. You wanted to see how I was doing, I said softly, letting the words float in the air like smoke. This is me. Liam's eyes darted around, taking in the magnitude of my work, the professional certificates framed neatly on a shelf, the contracts and letters of praise from clients I had built quietly over the years. He swallowed hard, the confidence he once wielded like a weapon now faltering. I run this studio, I continued, my voice steady but warm. I design for hotels, boutiques, private clients. I have a team, a reputation, and yes, financial independence. Something I imagine you assumed I would never achieve. Mom gasped, then looked at Dad for some explanation he clearly didn't have. Liam's jaw tightened, and I saw it, the flicker of shame, of recognition. He remembered the night he had shouted at me. The words that once haunted me now seemed to shrink in the enormity of what I had built. I stayed silent, I said, letting my eyes meet his. I didn't fight back then, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I chose to focus on my life, my growth, my future. And I did it. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Their stunned expressions mirrored a cocktail of regret, awe, and something I'd never seen from them before: respect. For the first time, Liam looked at me not as the troublemaker, not as the sister to be dismissed, but as a woman who had carved her own path, unshakable and brilliant. And in that silence, I felt a strange, quiet victory. Not vengeance, not anger, just the satisfaction of knowing that the girl he told to leave had not only survived, but thrived. I watched them shift uncomfortably, like children caught in a room full of mirrors, reflecting both their shame and their astonishment. For the first time, the power in the room was not theirs. It was mine. I took a deep breath, letting the quiet stretch just long enough to make them squirm. Then I spoke, deliberately measured, calm. I want to make one thing clear. I can help. I can support. But that doesn't mean I will tolerate the same patterns that pushed me away in the first place. Liam's shoulders stiffened, but I didn't waver. If you want a place in my life again, I continued, there are conditions. I laid them out one by one. First, honesty. No more shouting, no more dismissing each other. You will speak with respect, even when you disagree. I caught Liam's eyes. Especially you. Second, accountability. Everyone has dreams and responsibilities. You cannot demand attention or sympathy while refusing to take ownership of your own lives. I gestured toward my designs, framed sketches, and contracts. This is what happens when you face your fears and work for what you want. I expect the same effort from you, if you're part of my world. Third, I said, softening slightly, I care about the family we have. I will help, but only if you commit to growth. Toxic habits, old grudges, and judgmental behavior end here. They stay outside this room. Mom's lips trembled, a mix of guilt and hope. Dad nodded slowly, eyes on the floor. Liam shifted uncomfortably, but I could see a flicker of understanding there, buried beneath the stubborn pride. And finally, I said, my tone warm but firm, you must respect my boundaries. My time, my achievements, my decisions, they are mine. I will not allow anyone to belittle my worth again. If you are here, it is because you are willing to meet me halfway. Nothing less. The room was silent. The weight of my words had settled like sunlight through the blinds, unforgiving, illuminating, and undeniable. I wasn't angry. I was clear. I cared, but I was not bending to old patterns of dismissal or fear. Compassion and strength could coexist, and in this space, I set the rules. My journey had taught me that power wasn't about control. It was about clarity, integrity, and choosing who belongs in your life. For the first time in years, Liam looked at me not as a sister to yell at or dismiss, but as a woman whose life was her own. And I saw, just for a moment, a willingness to rise to the challenge I had set before them. Weeks passed, and I began to notice subtle changes. Liam no longer barged into my office with sharp words or judgmental stares. He started asking questions, curious, tentative, genuine, about my work, my process, my choices. Mom called occasionally, her voice softer, less apologetic but more present. Even Dad, who had always kept a distance, stopped by with small gestures of support, a favorite coffee, a compliment on a new design. It wasn't instant. Some days, old patterns tried to creep in, whispers of the past testing the walls I had built. But each time, I reminded myself and them of the conditions I had set: respect, accountability, boundaries, growth. Slowly, the family we could have been began to emerge from the shadows of the family we once were. I often caught myself sitting at my desk, fingers brushing the tiny silver star on my bracelet, the same one Grandma Ruth had given me years ago. It had traveled with me through uncertainty, heartbreak, and triumph, a silent witness to every late night, every doubt, every victory. I smiled at the thought that something so small had held so much power, that a simple reminder of love and guidance could steer me through storms I once thought I couldn't survive. Looking out at the city skyline, I felt the weight of my journey lift just enough to see clearly. The pain, the rejection, the nights of loneliness, they were all threads woven into the tapestry of the woman I had become. Strong, unshakable, and fiercely independent. And yet, strength didn't mean isolation. I could care, I could guide, I could reconnect, but only on my terms. Only in ways that honored the path I had walked and the life I had built. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of sunlight through the window, and whispered to myself, a quiet mantra of triumph. I am no one's shadow. I am the light I've always carried, and nothing, no words, no doubt, no anger, can take it from me. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace, knowing that my silence had been powerful, my patience purposeful, and my voice, finally, truly heard.